On March 22, 2024, it began as a quiet morning in Coral Springs, a suburban community known for its orderly streets, family neighborhoods, and relative sense of safety. But by the end of that day, the city would be shaken by the violent death of one of its most prominent public figures, Nancy Metayer Bowen. Nancy Metayer Bowen was 46 years old at the time of her death. She was widely known throughout Coral Springs, not only as a public servant, but also as a community advocate, a mother, and someone deeply invested in the well-being of the city she helped govern. Born into a Haitian-American family, Nancy's upbringing was shaped by a strong sense of cultural identity and community responsibility. Her parents had instilled in her the importance of education, discipline, and service. Growing up, she was described as focused and driven, someone who naturally took on leadership roles even at a young age. She pursued higher education with determination, eventually earning degrees that supported her career in public administration and community engagement. Before entering politics, Nancy worked in roles that centered on public service and nonprofit involvement. Her work often focused on education, youth development, and strengthening relationships between local government and residents. Nancy's entry into politics came from a place of genuine concern for her community. She wasn't seen as someone chasing power, but rather someone responding to a need. She ran for city commission and was eventually elected, later becoming vice mayor. In that role, she was known for advocating for inclusive policies, supporting minority communities, and encouraging civic participation. Colleagues often described her as composed, articulate, and deeply committed. She had a reputation for listening, taking time to understand concerns rather than simply responding to them. Residents recognized her as approachable, someone who would show up to community events, speak directly with constituents, and follow through on issues that mattered. Outside of her public life, Nancy was a mother. Her family life was central to her identity, though, like many individuals balancing professional and personal responsibilities, she carried pressures that were not always visible from the outside. She was married to Stephen Bowen. To outsiders, their marriage appeared stable. There were no widely known public disputes or incidents that suggested the kind of violence that would later come to define this case. However, as investigators would eventually uncover, not everything inside the home reflected the calm image presented to the public. In the months leading up to her death, Nancy was reportedly considering expanding her political career. Discussions of a potential run for higher office, possibly even Congress, had begun circulating among those close to her. It was seen as a natural progression for someone with her experience and visibility. She was, by all accounts, at a pivotal moment in her life, personally and professionally. The days leading up to March 22nd did not initially raise alarms. Nancy continued her usual schedule, attending meetings, engaging with community matters, and maintaining her responsibilities as vice mayor. However, within the household, tensions may have been building. While much of what occurred behind closed doors remains known only through investigative findings and statements, authorities would later point to signs of strain within the marriage. These were not necessarily visible to the public, but they became central to understanding what unfolded. There were indications that arguments had occurred. Investigators would later examine physical evidence within the home that suggested prior conflict, damage that did not align with a peaceful domestic environment. Still, there was no immediate intervention, no prior police reports that publicly indicated a violent pattern. Like many domestic situations that escalate over time, the warning signs, if present, were not widely recognized or formally documented. On March 22nd, events inside the Bowen household took a fatal turn. At some point during the day, an altercation occurred between Nancy Metayer Bowen and her husband, Stephen Bowen. The exact timeline of their interactions is pieced together through investigative findings, but what is clear is that the confrontation escalated into violence. Nancy was shot multiple times inside her home. The lack of forced entry immediately narrowed the scope of the investigation. There was no indication of an intruder. The scene pointed towards someone who had access to the home, someone Nancy knew. Following the shooting, efforts were made to conceal the crime. Nancy's body was wrapped in blankets and garbage bags. This detail would later become one of the most disturbing aspects of the case, not only because of the act itself, but because it suggested a level of awareness and intent after the fact. Inside the home, investigators would later find signs of damage. Objects had been disturbed, indicating that a struggle or violent confrontation had taken place prior to the shooting. What happened next added another layer to the timeline. Stephen Bowen reportedly left the residence. At some point, law enforcement became involved. The circumstances of how police were alerted and how they arrived at the home form a critical part of the case, as officers began to piece together what had occurred. When authorities arrived and entered the residence, they were met with a scene that confirmed their worst suspicions. Nancy Metayer Bowen was found deceased. The manner in which her body had been concealed immediately indicated that this was not an accidental death. It was a deliberate act, followed by an attempt to manage or hide the outcome. Police secured the scene and began a detailed investigation. The community response was swift. News of Nancy's death spread quickly through Coral Springs. Residents, colleagues, and officials expressed shock and disbelief. For many, it was difficult to reconcile the image of a composed public leader with the violence that had taken place inside her home. City officials released statements acknowledging her contributions and mourning her loss. Community members gathered in informal vigils, reflecting on her work and the impact she had made. At the same time, law enforcement focused on identifying exactly what had happened and who was responsible. From the outset, the investigation centered on the circumstances inside the home. There were several critical factors. No signs of forced entry. Evidence of a struggle. The condition in which the body was found. Statements made by individuals connected to the residence. Stephen Bowen quickly became the primary focus. During questioning, he reportedly made statements that raised further concern. Among them was a remark along the lines of, "I couldn't take it anymore." While the full context of this statement would be examined as part of the legal process, it suggested emotional distress and possible motive. Investigators also analyzed the physical evidence. Ballistics from the firearm used. Blood spatter patterns. Damage to objects within the home. The positioning and condition of the body. Each piece contributed to reconstructing the sequence of events. Forensic teams worked to determine where the shooting occurred, whether there had been movement of the body afterward, the timeline between the shooting and the arrival of authorities. Digital evidence also played a role. Communications, phone records, and any available surveillance footage were reviewed to establish a clearer picture of the hours leading up to the incident. As the investigation progressed, the case against Stephen Bowen strengthened. One of the most significant turning points came from the combination of physical evidence and statements. The lack of forced entry effectively ruled out an unknown intruder. This narrowed the focus to individuals within the household. The condition of the scene, particularly the concealment of the body, suggested post-incident actions that required time and intent. This was not a situation where someone immediately called for help or reported an accident. The internal damage to the home indicated that the confrontation may have escalated over a period of time before the shooting occurred. Statements made by Stephen Bowen, including expressions of emotional strain, were examined in the context of motive. Investigators sought to understand whether the incident was the result of a sudden escalation or part of a broader pattern of conflict. While the public speculated about possible political motives or external threats, the investigation consistently pointed inward to the dynamics within the household. Stephen Bowen was arrested and charged in connection with the death of Nancy Metayer Bowen. The case moved into the legal system, where prosecutors presented evidence gathered during the investigation. This included forensic findings, witness statements, and any admissions or inconsistencies identified during questioning. The charges reflected the seriousness of the crime. As proceedings unfolded, the court examined the sequence of events leading to the shooting, the actions taken afterward, the intent behind both. The defense and prosecution each presented their interpretations of the evidence, but the core facts remained grounded in the physical findings and investigative work. Ultimately, the case was not one of mystery in terms of identifying a suspect. Instead, it became a matter of legal determination, establishing responsibility, intent, and the appropriate consequences. The death of Nancy Metayer Bowen stands as a deeply unsettling case, not because of complexity in identifying what happened, but because of where it happened and who was involved. It occurred inside a home, involving individuals who were part of each other's daily lives. It affected not only a family, but an entire community that had come to know Nancy as a leader and advocate. Her life reflected years of commitment to public service, community engagement, and leadership. Her death, however, highlighted the often hidden realities of domestic conflict and how they can escalate into irreversible outcomes. For the residents of Coral Springs, the case left a lasting impact. It challenged assumptions about safety, about public figures, and about what can exist beneath the surface of even the most seemingly stable environments. Nancy Metayer Bowen is remembered not only for the circumstances of her death, but for the work she did during her life. Work that shaped her community and left a mark that extended far beyond the events of March 22, 2024. If you found the story of Nancy Metayer Bowen insightful and worth reflecting on, consider subscribing to the channel and turning on the notification bell to stay updated on more carefully researched and compelling true crime stories.